Welcome to the Man Amongst Men podcast. Live a life of intentionality, adventure, and brotherhood. Take the inner journey and live out over your edge constantly. Here are your hosts, Dominick and Bryan.
Sunday afternoon, you're on the couch watching the games, eating some chicken wings, maybe pounding a few beers, and you turn to your buddies and tell them you're going to go on a men's retreat next weekend. Do they, A, put the game on pause to turn to you and ask probing, insightful questions with genuine curiosity, or B, ask you if you need help packing your skirt and heels for the trip? This is a scenario that I talk about in my TEDx talk to reveal that even when a man wants to do the inner journey, to take a step with other men, to explore your edge, that the guys in your life may not get it, and you may still face ridicule from your friends or from your coworkers, or at a very minimum, a raised eyebrow and a lack of understanding as to why you would want to do any of that stuff. And what we don't talk enough about are the payoffs of doing the inner journey. So in today's episode, Bryan and I talk about 7 reasons why you need to do men's work.
Dominick, I've been part of groups, whether it's a sports team or a professional setting, groups of men. But when I hear the term men's work, It creeps me out a little bit.
Yeah. Sensitive men going out into the woods, holding hands, sharing feelings.
Yeah, sitting in a circle, talking about
effeminate stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Why is men's work pigeonholed in that way, right? Because like when you're around dudes, mostly you're watching sports, going out meeting women, eating chicken wings, doing shots.
Drinking beer.
Yeah. And
right.
Anything outside of that is typically considered...
It's a not manly thing to do.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. If you're doing sports, if you're doing anything around sports, if you're watching sports, if you're working out, if you're playing sports, that's cool.
Yep.
If you're drinking, cool. If you're going after women, cool. But anything other than that, which I don't think you do any of that at men's work or men's groups.
Yeah. But why is that the prevailing belief that when you hear about men's work, that those are the things you're going to do? And so I want to be very clear is that you and I don't feel that way about men's work. We're actually huge proponents of it. However, the men that we speak to have those reservations about it. And like when you talk about going to a men's retreat, men have this recoil or this resistance of, it's going to get weird.
There's
right?
going to be no women, no alcohol, and no sports.
And lots of elephant walks.
What,
so what are you doing?
going to do there?
Yeah. What could you possibly?
This sounds miserable.
So we're going to broaden your horizons in this conversation. And the bottom line is this. I've been doing men's work for about 8 or 9 years now. You've been doing it for just under 2. And the bottom line is that I've never made more money in my life. I've never asserted more freedom in my life. I've never taken better command. I've never had better relationships with women. I've never understood my emotions better. I've never acted more boldly, taken more risks in my life. And I've never felt safer in my life because no matter what failures I come across, I've got this astoundingly powerful group of men who are constantly calling me forward in life. And you have the same. You and I are both part of a regular men's group that gets together every Monday night. We'll talk about that and share the stories of how that's upgraded our lives so quickly and even just 6 months worth of work. But today we want to talk about like 7 reasons why you, who as a man who's listening to this, and for our ladies who are listening to this, like why your man needs to participate in men's work so that we can hopefully push you into that place where you step out of being that rugged individual, doing everything on your own, the way that you've been taught.
Lone wolf.
The lone wolf. So that like you could be a part of a pack, a tribe that pulls you and carries you forward and calls you to higher ground, right? And the quote that I don't know who to attribute this to, but always says that to go fast, go alone. To go far, go with others. And so that's kind of the underpinning of what we're talking about today. Reason number 1, why you need to do men's work is, Bryan, do you know who the unhappiest person in the world is?
I do not.
The unhappiest person in the world is a 45-year-old man. And that's based on happiness studies by the expert Arthur Brooks, who's written 10 books on happiness and others. And I had a chance to see this man speak in 2014. And what he had said was, if you look at universal happiness curves, men bottom out at the age of like 45 to 47, 48 years old. Now, why does this happen? So I'm an executive coach. I work with a lot of high performing people who make a lot of really good money and have the lives that most of us have aspired to achieve. Families, houses, vacations, etc. And many, if not most, of the men that I work with that fit this profile or in that age group will confide in me that they are restless, trapped, dead inside, not feeling what they thought they were going to feel.
Numb is the word that comes to mind.
It's a big one. Yeah. And when I did my first men's retreat, when I went to my first men's retreat, it was a thing called the Mankind Project. This 50-year-old guy walked in and he was like in great shape, dressed really well. And like I heard about his family, multi-millionaire. And like he showed me a picture of his family, beautiful. And when we asked him why he was there, his like really candid response was, I don't think I can experience joy. And we're like, what are you talking about, dude? He goes, ever since I was a kid, my parents set these goals for me. I crushed them, sports, work, women, all throughout my life, goal setting, goal crushing. And I have everything that I thought I ever wanted, and I'm incapable of experiencing joy. I see my daughter. I know I love her, but even when she's like as happy as can be, for some reason, like I'm disconnected from her. I don't know if I can feel joy anymore. And one of the reasons for this, man, like, and I'm really curious to hear about your opinion on this, Bryan, is like, we have been built to be rugged individualists. So what we mean by that is at an early age, don't cry. Don't be a pussy. Be a man, man up. And so you learn that like all of these feelings or emotions, if it's not anger, if it's not, ambition, keep that shit to yourself.
Yeah, it's baggage. Anything other than something that's moving you forward towards the goal that's been dictated by culture or external life is baggage.
It's baggage. And because it's baggage, then you learn to deal with it on your own. And in that isolation, like you're not connected to anyone else, which is why women who are, naturally better at connecting, and like we oftentimes can look at women and say like, oh, like you're dropping drama on each other. No, like what women are doing is they're actually letting others know what's going on in their lives and giving others an opportunity to support them or call them forward. And in the meantime, we're doing all this stuff on our own. We don't really know what other guys are dealing with. And we think that our own baggage is so unique to us that another man couldn't possibly be going through the same thing.
Yeah, and that happiness factor for me, Dominick, you mentioned I started doing men's work about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I would say my level of happiness at this point is happier than I've ever been.
Yep.
I will also say the roller coaster has had way higher ups and way lower downs.
Totally.
And that's okay, but that's not how I was brought up. That's not what I experienced as a younger male.
Yes.
I was taught very specifically, even using a baseball analogy, when you're in the batter's box, you don't get too high, you don't get too excited, you don't get too low. You just stay right in the middle and boom, hit the ball.
Yes. Okay. Let's move into number 2 then, which is that emotions are data and you are data illiterate. And what you just hit on is the fact that in certain contexts, don't get too high, don't get too low matters. Like if you're in the heat of battle, getting too high or getting too low is going to get you killed. It's going to get your platoon killed. If you're in a batter's box and you're getting too high or too low, if you're on a sporting field, then you aren't emotionally in the right place that you need to be to get the job done. That though, as like a life system, like a frame for getting through your everyday life of don't get too high, too low, what you're basically doing is you're numbing. You're numbing. And like in my life, that's exactly how I was operating. And the analogy, I can't remember, like it was one of our other podcasts, so we did this. Analogy I've given is if I think of the range of emotions like a football field, one end zone is like the supreme end of negative emotion, like fear and pain and depression maybe. And the total other opposite end of the end zone is bliss and joy and love and connection. I narrowed the range of those emotions to like 2 feet on either side of the 50-yard line because I couldn't deal with the lows. And because I couldn't deal with the lows, I had to numb myself out. But at the same time, simultaneously, I wasn't allowing myself.
Right. When you numb out the lows, you also numb out the highs. And so I'm not surprised that 50-year-old man that was at that group, he said, I can't feel joy.
Yeah.
Because that's on the extreme side of the happy scale.
Right on. In pursuit of his goals, which we found out, is that he had to eliminate fear. And here's the big misconception. It's like, fear is never something that you can eliminate. Like fear is a human emotion. You feel it. But when you eliminate the fear, like it's basically ignoring it. It's suppressing it. It's there, but like you're just kind of shutting that off. To shut off that feeling, you automatically shut off feeling other things as well. I believe real courage to be feeling the fear and doing it anyway. The best quote I ever heard about that was, fear is wetting your pants. Courage is doing what needs to get done with wet pants.
Right. And I think it's some of those emotions that when I grew up, I thought they were bad emotions.
Yeah.
Right. The fear, insecurity, jealousy are things that are not okay to feel. So I would do everything to avoid them or to not acknowledge them. And now after doing some of this men's work, I've started to recognize that these things aren't bad. These emotions aren't bad.
Where did you get the message that they were bad? Did you learn that or did someone teach you that?
If I was to get angry as a younger guy, it's like, well, hey, control your emotions. Right? Don't get so angry. Jealousy is the root of all evil. Right? I was taught that. So jealousy is no longer a valid or okay emotion.
Don't feel it.
Don't feel it.
Yep.
Insecurity very much came from a world of competition. And if you're insecure, it means you don't know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you can't accomplish your goals.
Yeah.
And so those were all bad emotions.
Yeah.
And so what I've started to realize through this men's work is that all these emotions are all, to your point, they're data points and they're all valid. And quite frankly, it's what has helped clarify my life because I can use those as indicators for further exploration.
Quick indicator. And this is why this emotion things matters is what you just hit on, especially let's say in the business and professional space, because I do a lot of coaching there. The men that I work with believe emotions to be a liability. It's like, let's eliminate the emotions and let's just do this from the head up. Now, I see a lot of business leaders increasingly needing to get more done in a very short period of time. So like speed is of the essence. And there's a direct contradiction or a direct tension with the way that business leaders are making decisions because they're constantly in their head calculating every possible outcome. If you're going into a sales situation, calculating every possible objection. If you're about to go lead your people and you're going in front of an audience, you're calculating this and that. And if this happens, contingency plan A, B, and C. Part of that is doing the right work. But the other part of that is like, you're never going to be able to anticipate everything that could possibly come up. And it's exhausting and it's time consuming. If you can become emotion literate, data literate, then when a feeling pops up inside your body and you can detect, I felt that fear in my stomach. But actually, I also feel excitement in my stomach in the same place. Am I actually feeling fear? Am I feeling excitement? Or when you feel like the chills, like for me, when I know I'm hitting on a big idea, I feel like a tingle back down my spine. And when someone's talking and they're saying something, I feel that tingle down my spine. I'm like, wait a minute, right here, we need to dive deeper. There's these data points because I learned the language that help me to basically cut off 10 hours of thought and worry and anxiety. That's why this shit matters.
And that for, like, let's say a sales pitch, maybe it was 10 hours of anxiety or trying to get the right slide or this or that. Whereas you can feel what was the right thing. Now, I'll take that to another extreme. I was working with a real estate agent in Chicago. I could tell that she was maybe a little bit shady, but she had some really good ideas. And so what I did is I took those emotions that I felt, invalidated them, looked at the data, said it all made sense, and then proceeded down a 3-year nightmare scenario of working in real estate. So I think that there's this element of we need our feelings, we need our emotions to be validated to help us make the good decisions, which will make things go faster.
So you're saying in that situation, it's like you had the feeling, but like you let your mind override the decision. Then you went down a path for 3 years that you had to unwind.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
We do that all the time.
Because my head was what I've been taught to use. It's the tool that I know how to use.
Yeah.
The feelings and emotions are innate, but also invalid because they're just emotions. They're just feelings.
They're just emotions, just feelings. Yeah. And so
get over it.
Right. And if you want to make faster decisions without all of the information, because you're never going to have all of the information, then you have to become data literate. One more big thing.
Emotionally data literate.
Emotionally data literate. Exactly. And one more big thing that I find is when emotions are negated or emotions are subverted or they're made to be wrong, men that are in their 40s or 50s end up losing their fire. And this is a huge one. So like I'm working with a few executives right now who are in their, I would say about 50 years of age that run $1 billion per year revenue companies, like huge businesses. And that fuck yeah energy is gone. And some of these men I've known for like 10 or 15 years where I used to know and see their energy back in the day where that fire was there. But over time, not actually tasting the high, not feeling the low like you were saying before, because the low can hurt. And if you want to like shortchange that or short circuit the feeling into the low, you're also short circuiting the high. And that may work in the short term, but these guys have lost their fire. And what ends up happening is they show up to work giving a C+ effort. Now, they're so good at what they do that the rest of the world can kind of see it as like maybe an A- effort, but they're not thrilled to be navigating through their days. And it's sad. They don't feel content. They feel restless or trapped in their lives. You can head that off at the pass if you can start to feel into your emotions. One of the ways to do that is through men's work.
You had a retreat that was about 18 months ago. That was one of my first experiences seeing other men express both highs and lows.
Yeah.
Now, I thought going into it, that was really strange.
Yeah, you were uncomfortable with that.
I was super uncomfortable with that. I was an emotional voyeur seeing how excited I got. I think one of the questions that you had asked the group to talk about is, when are you most alive?
I feel most alive when.
Right. And that brought tears to some guys' eyes that couldn't talk, which made me feel very emotionally awkward.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, because like the way this exercise goes down is a man has to stand in front of the room, say, I feel most alive when, and then tap into emotion, right? Like I feel most alive when I'm at the top of a mountain about to ski down on a double black diamond. I feel most alive when my 2 children are with me and I'm reading them a bedtime story. And what the men that are listening do is that if they can feel you, if they're actually moved by your emotion, then they pound their chest as a sign of, I can feel you. And what's fascinating is like some guys will go up in front of the room and say, I feel most alive when I'm with my family because I love them. And you feel nothing. Like they're just in their head.
In the audience, as an audience member, you don't yell out the word bullshit, but that's what you're thinking.
And your lack of chest pounding is exactly that. But you had this fascinating thing that we just talked about offline, which was when your turn was to go in front of the room, it wasn't about connecting to emotion. Yours was about your frame, was about performance.
Performance, exactly. And so like we talked early on about the men's groupings I had been in before are all about competition.
Right.
And so for me, going into this was in some way a competition. So what do you do in a competition? You perform.
Yeah.
And so for me, performance is neck up. And I'm going to wow these guys with when I'm most alive. I'm going to have the best story in the room.
Yeah.
And what I realized in that moment was it's not about the best story. It's about truly tapping into what those emotions and feelings are. Now, at that point, I was emotionally illiterate.
Yes.
And it was really interesting. The reason I use the word emotional voyeur is because it allowed me to see other men be open, speak from the heart, and see that transformative emotion in their life. And I was like, wow.
I know.
That's new. That's different. And that's not something I could have done on my own.
Yeah. And at the same time, it was also really uncomfortable for you, right? Because there was this one guy who went up and was breaking down. He was telling the story about like he and his wife having these moments at the end of the night after they put their kids to bed. And like as they shut the door to their respective kids' rooms, they would like meet eyes in the hallway and give each other this knowing glance of, we've got this. They were going through times like where they didn't know if they were going to make it, right? And he was sputtering and crying and could barely get through it. And I remember
his t-shirt was soaked and he was snotting.
Yeah.
And I was like, and Dominick, you were leading this session. In my head, consciously, I was like, Dominick, please pull him off the stage.
Right.
Like he's dying up there.
And I was moved. Like I was, like tearing up watching him. Like I could feel that. And I was at a place where you were not too long ago, right? Where something like that would be like, oh God, he's not performing well. He's not telling the story with passion. He's not.
Suck it up and tell the story.
Yeah.
That's what was going through my head.
He was telling the story with passion, but like, yeah, he couldn't get through it. And like for me, back in the day, the performance element of it, like the way you were judging it, there wasn't room for real emotion. I actually don't remember yours, right? I don't remember yours.
Exactly.
Because from a performance perspective, like even when you're good at it, you're not really in it that like people can feel it. This story it kind of ties these two together. I'm a huge fan of the HBO show Hard Knocks. Hard Knocks is basically a show that features like a football team in training camp. This year, they featured the hapless Cleveland Browns. Hugh Jackson is the coach that has basically been presiding over a team that has won one game in 2 years. And what you have a chance to see in these behind the scenes footage is that Hugh Jackson's mother dies. For the first 2 episodes, she's sick. And then in the 3rd episode, she dies. There's this scene where Hugh Jackson's in his office sitting behind his desk. And then all of his like assistant coaches are sitting in front of him at this table and they're all watching game film. And the general manager walks into the room and the general manager is like to Hugh Jackson, "Hey, I'm sorry. How are you feeling?" And he was like, it's been rough. And then he says, "My mother died," because none of the assistant coaches knew. And the assistant coaches turn around and look at him for like a 10th of a second, right? And they're like, "Hey, sorry." And Hugh Jackson's like, "Yeah, man, it's been really rough. My mother died. My brother died 2 weeks earlier. It's been a really rough couple of weeks." Okay, so is that 3/4 coverage that we're watching on the TV screen? Like that
uncomfortable,
that jarring, and all the men in the room like quickly pivoted back. It was as shallow of a dive into an emotion as you could possibly imagine. Then right, like the whole thing went down in 30 seconds. And I remember my heart hurting for this guy because like an episode later, he does break down by himself when no one else is in the room. And he's like, got his head in his hands and he's like, "Keep it together, keep it together, keep it together, keep it together." That was like the epitome for me about how most men go about dealing with hardships is like, I can't show it, or I can deal with it for like a toe dip in, and then let's quickly go back to the business at hand. That's how you end up as a 50-year-old man who's like one of the unhappiest in the world.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world, because we do get that. If I feel back into that moment where the guy at the men's group was crying related to his family, I know how those other coaches, those assistant coaches felt in that room, because you're like, okay, like let's move on and get out of this emotion as soon as possible, because this is awkward. I can't sit in this.
Am I going to have to hand the head coach a tissue? Like, this is weird. Right. So I think this goes nicely into number 3, which is the reason 3 why you need to do men's work is your lady, your woman, isn't your therapist. And here's what we mean by that. If you don't do men's work and if you don't have a place to bring your most difficult shit, the place that 99% of men bring it is into their relationship. Of course, you and I are huge proponents of building deep intimacy, talking about what's going on with your woman. But if you're bringing all of your baggage to her, what in essence is happening is she's becoming your therapist. She's becoming your trash receptacle for everything. And there's a big burden that you're placing on your shoulders. Inadvertently, what can be happening is you could be depolarizing your relationship with her.
Yeah. This is something that you and I, every Monday night, we get together with a group of 6 to 8 guys.
Yeah.
And we go through a process together.
Yeah.
And the purpose of this men's group is to practice feeling our feelings.
Yep.
And what that allows me to do...
I was going to say, that sounds really lame, so let's dive into that. Like, why would we want to practice feeling our feelings?
Exactly. It does sound lame. And when the first time I heard it, I was like, what? It seems
We're going to do
obnoxious.
That? Yeah.
And then somebody said, don't worry, it's like a dojo for emotions. And I was like, well, I can go with dojo. That's cool. That seems very martial arty and interesting. Yeah. Thanks, MMA. That's what we do on Monday nights. Amongst many ways, one way that's been super valuable for me is... if my girlfriend was the only person that I felt comfortable opening up with, everything I would give her would be high volume and very raw, because it's the first time I would be expressing it.
Okay.
When I have the men's group, I can go in there and let out that rawness, let off those missiles of like, here's how I'm really feeling.
Yeah.
And get it out in its raw form.
Why does it matter that you can bring it out in its raw form?
It matters because that's truly what I'm feeling at that time. Now, just like information, emotions need to be processed. And what this allows me to do is you get the rawness out in that start to process what that emotion is.
So is there a fear of bringing the raw emotion to Layla, your girlfriend?
I feel like if I did that every single time with every emotional thing I was going through, that'd be exhausting for her.
Okay, I got
you.
And
it wouldn't leave room for other areas of our relationship, and she would become my therapist.
Right.
And so by being able to get that out in the men's group and have people just hear me, it just allows me to process and then adds clarity on what to do next. Do I need to feel into more? Maybe it is a conversation that I have with my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not, and I process it with a group of people, other guys, and I don't have to do anything else with it.
Right. That's really helpful, man. And one of the other things is that a big central theme in most men's life, especially the ones who are in relationships, is their relationship with their woman. And you can't always bring that directly to your woman. So we had a men's group meeting here in my home. My coach of 3 years, John O'Connor, who's spectacular. He's been married for 8 or 9 years. We went around the room. 75% of the men were married. And I would say half of them weren't having sex with their partner. And part of it was because they'd lost interest in their partner. But the other part of it was because these men were getting rejected by their wives. And John had asked the question, he's like, hey, do you guys know what really turns your woman on? Do you really know how she likes to have sex? And the first answer of every guy was like, yeah, of course. And then John was like, do you? And then the guys were kind of like, not really. I think I do. And their relationships had gotten stale. Their insecurities around making advances and getting rejected, or feeling like their woman was just having sex with them to check the box and not really enthusiastic about it. Early on, you don't want to be bringing that directly, like you were saying, in the raw emotion, because in a men's group, you can be like, I'm not having sex. She shuts me down. She pays more attention to the kids than she pays attention to me. I'm fucking pissed. You bring that energy to her, that is counterproductive. You bring it to the men's group, then that can clear space. You can allow it to get out and then get to the higher ground. If you don't have a group of men to talk about that with, then it stays in there.
I love it. And that's the importance of having other guys in the room where it's not a performance, but it's a perspective and it's a processing. And so that's what I love that story, Dominic, because now it's not just me sitting in a room by myself saying, oh, I'm not having as much sex as I want to. It would be getting out into a group of men that are giving me their perspective. And actually their perspective is, me too. I also have this problem. So that's good to hear.
Totally.
It's a perspective on maybe another way to think about it, a way to process it. And so these are the things you can't do on your own.
The fourth reason why you need to do men's work is because you are not living life boldly enough. And I love this quote from Robert Frost where he says, freedom lies in being bold. How do I know that you're not living life boldly enough? My learned behavior throughout life was, if you fail, then you're less of a man, right? If you have insecurity, you're less of a man. You can't, don't show that, don't show doubt, don't show whatever, don't show fear. And so I started realizing that I was playing only games that I could win, right? Because the fear of rejection, the fear of going for something and not getting it, and then other people seeing that kept me from really excelling. When I started doing men's work was when I started getting bold around the idea of leaving a 15-year corporate career, which I was really successful at. I could have done whatever I wanted while I was still at that company, but there was no passion or energy that was really burning for me there. But I had this desire to go into doing what I'm doing now, which is coaching, creating my future, which is writing books and speaking. And when I started to realize that there were these men who were speaking to the highest version of me, that wouldn't allow me to kind of drift back into this complacency of, but the money's really good at work and they like me there. They would be like, bullshit, dude. Dom, you have this gift to go out and talk to other people and to create. And I can see the fire in your eyes light up when you talk about that. I never see the fire in your eyes when you talk about the money you're making at this company. And so they just provided that positive peer pressure that you had talked about before. The peer pressure that I was used to from fraternity days, because I was in a frat and president of the fraternity, and then sports days was, come on, pussy, man up. It was fear-based, and it kind of reinforced the old ways of being. This group was dude, I'm not going to allow you to coast. I'm not going to buy your bullshit excuse for staying in the company that you're making good money, because I believe that there's something bigger there. A perfect example of this was when we did our men's retreat last year. I put down the challenge of, who are the men in this room who want to go for the 100 consecutive push-up challenge? 19 men came to the retreat. Only 6 guys, you were one of them, who said, I think I could realistically go for 100. Only 6 men showed up saying, I trained for it. After the first 24 hours of us men hanging out together, where we realized it wasn't about succeeding or failing, it was about, would you step up and try the challenge? 16 of the 19 men ended up going for it. Only 2 guys got it. But the most important part was that they played the game. And they played the game because it no longer was like this, only if you succeed in hitting the 100 is the only reason why you should play it. It was more about like, let's see what you're made of. What are you capable? And to a man, they all outperformed what they thought they would do. So if you can create a container like men's groups where you can take risks, it's a safe space where you don't have to play it safe.
And it's these guys calling you to a higher place. I've done, Dominic, hundreds of interviews with people around their value systems, what they're good at, what they're not good at, performance. And what I found is people generally are pretty good at telling other people what they're not good at, where their areas of improvement are. People generally are horrible at saying what they're good at.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hard to look at your higher self if you don't really understand what you're good at. And so having these guys, as you described in the men's group, call you to the highest version of yourself, seeing those values and skills and things in you is, again, something you can't do outside of a group. It's something that you need somebody else to be a mirror for, to be a reflection for, and something that you then, and that I do in the men's group, want to live up to.
Yeah, what you just said, being hard on ourselves or not being able to articulate what we're really good at. I mean, one of these things happened recently with Mark in our men's group where I'm notoriously hard on myself. I just have this like really harsh inner critic. No matter what I do, I just can't seem to ever do enough. And Mark looked at me one day and he was like, brother, you are already the guy that you were trying so hard to become. You're already the guy you're trying so hard to become. And in that moment, all of that inner critic stuff shut down because I was like, God damn it, he's right. I'm always seeing like if I write that next book or if I get that next largest client, if I get on that bigger stage, if we get more followers like on our podcast or followers on whatever social media channel, then I'll be good enough. And he's like, dude, you're already the guy that you're trying so hard to be. And so you're right. Like we have men around us that speak to the highest version. And when I start to rest on my laurels a little bit, you'll call me on that shit. Max will call me on it. Like we have men that will not allow that to stay stuck for very long.
Yeah.
The next one is personal development on your own is slow, shallow, and incomplete. But men's work is like gasoline on a fire. When I see men who are doing personal development work, like I see a lot of men who love reading books, listening to podcasts, right? It's like I'll consume Tim Ferriss all day long. We'll read these books that'll help me make me better at business and in work. There's like a certain layer of safety and complacency that men are playing because I started off in that spot. And I'm not begrudging anyone starting there. And I still read a ton of books. I still listen to podcasts. But if you're doing it on your own, it's slow, it's shallow, and it's incomplete. And what we mean by that is if you're not mixing it up with other guys, if you're not truly putting yourself out and sharing like your deepest insecurities or listening to what other men are dealing with, which are universally things that you're dealing with too, then you're not moving through this stuff quickly enough. Right. And like, I think you said something about a mirror, like seeing another man.
Absolutely. When we sit literally in a circle, right, on Monday nights, we go through a period where everybody does a share. 9 times out of 10, when another guy shares, that is completely relational to me as well.
Right.
And hearing that, whatever it is they're going through, that fear, that thought, helps me think from a different perspective and helps me feel through that as well as they're going through it.
Going back to the men in the room who were married and they found out their wives, like that they weren't having sex with their wives. The guys in the room were so relieved that they weren't the only one. And it wasn't done from a bitching or a moaning standpoint. It was just kind of like, okay, this is a problem. And I've actually never talked to anyone about it. And I feel strange about it. There are other guys, like there are times where, man, like someone in the room looks like that they've got it all figured out. Their business is cranking. They have the woman of their dreams. And then they'll come into the room and be like, everything's working and I can't get rid of this impending sense of doom. Some shoe is going to drop. And it's like, oh my God, like I feel that way too. Why am I never content? And there's a piece in that. My journey into Sex Addicts Anonymous, I always thought that my behaviors were isolated to me. Like I thought that I was the only one who masturbated 3 or 4 times a day to regulate my emotions. I thought that I was the only one who watched an inordinate amount of porn. one of the greatest things about Sex Addicts Anonymous and going to those rooms is you get to hear from all these other men doing the same thing. And we almost were able to laugh at each other for thinking that we were the only ones. And so I've been a part of a lot of different men's groups where it doesn't matter if your problems are as like extreme as mine were. Just being able to hear another guy say that, yeah, like I got that same feeling brings out this level of connection that kind of goes into this next one, which is, and you experienced this coming into the men's retreat, competition in every context keeps you from connecting. If you apply competition to every context that you're in, it keeps you from true connection. The reason why that matters is because of the place where we first started is, as the unhappiest person in the world is a 45-year-old man. If you're constantly competing, it naturally keeps a barrier between you and someone else. That's why we love our women so much, right? It's like finally the place that we don't have to compete. But the bottom line is like you're creating the context of competition. It doesn't have to exist in every place.
Yeah, it's amazing in these groups where I think something that needs to be said about at least the men's group that we're part of. We're not there seeking advice.
Right.
It's something guys hate to hear and love to give.
Yes.
And that's not the purpose of the men's group. Now, are there really valuable conversations that happen afterwards that are advice? Yes, when asked for. But the purpose of the men's group is to go deeper, to feel more, to process. And what I've found is I've developed some amazing, deep relationships with those guys because of that vulnerability, because we are talking to those truths. There is no competition in this.
Yeah, there is no competition.
Even though I still feel it every time I walk in the door.
Yeah.
I hope my share today is going to be really good.
I remember you saying that one time, right? It was like a feelings competition. It's like who's going to cry more, who's going to tell the deepest story where every guy's pounding their chest because they can feel them more. And I feel that too. It's old conditioning. And I don't know if it will ever completely disappear, but to have a choice.
I will say that in the past 6 months, I think we've been doing that group, maybe a little longer than that. I will say that feeling of competition, of wanting to provide the best, has gone down.
But it's not gone. Yeah, yes. I'm with you.
And I do have to remind myself every time I step into that men's group is that all you really have to do, Bryan, is feel and speak what you feel. You can't possibly mess that up.
It's a challenge to look at another man in their group because like we have a man in our group who he's so dialed into his emotions, right? And then when he speaks from power. Like when he screams, sometimes he like lets out screams, moves the entire room. But there are other times where like he breaks down, and his range of emotions, his ability to name those emotions and to step into them very quickly is extraordinary. To not compete with him, right? Because like he's clearly beyond like where I am. It's a trick. It's a skill that I'm learning, is to be able to witness a model that I would like to be more like, but also see the admiration of the men in the room that go to him when he's in that space, and to not like desire that for myself, not to envy that. It is something that's like pushing me forward to learn more about like, how can I want to emulate someone, but not want to cut them down at the same time because they have something that I don't and I want it. That's new. The final thing I'll say on this is that competition, if you bring it into every context that you are in with men, also seeps over into your relationship with your woman. I see this a lot with very successful women because I work with a lot of highly successful women, especially in male-dominated environments. And in their intimate relationships, they either find they attract one of two types of men: an effeminate man who likes a woman who's like super successful and can give direction, and he just follows her. But they attract another kind of man who's this alpha dog who is also successful, who's also very, in the old world form of it, masculine, who then gets threatened by her success, by her level of importance. Maybe she makes more money than he does. And what these women tell me is that the man will cut her down, criticize her, will put doubt, like seeds of doubt in her, because like he needs to cut her down to size so that he can then step into his place of superiority. So if you're so deeply ingrained to compete, even if it's just with other men, it will seep into your relationship with your woman too.
Yeah, I would challenge, and this is something I challenge myself with, especially when it comes to the men's group, is I want to trade competition for permission. I have permission to feel that range of emotions. I have the permission to let that out and speak that out. The other way I could say that is I want to trade competition for growth. And being able to see that and witness another man being able to really get into their emotions is something I can absolutely grow to and aspire to and have permission to do instead of compete with.
Yeah, man.
And for my relationship with my girlfriend, very similar. Like, we don't need to compete at these different levels, but we can complement and grow.
Yeah. And the thing that you said about range of emotions is so important, because what I find with men is that we pinball to the extreme emotions. Deep anger, rage, unhinged, and then all the way to the other side is like, I love you, man. You know, like I think about my fraternity days. Those are the only two emotions that you could show, right? It was either some guy competing or like, you're a pussy, or berating someone. And then the other side would be like, I love you guys. I would do anything for you.
And when would the I love you guys usually happen?
Usually after like there was an argument, or someone had had 14 beers and was like, I love, like I was standing there. And
it almost like squeaked out.
Yeah. You know, like sometimes these guys would like stand in front of a room and make like, you know, a proclamation, but they were not conscious, right? It would just be like, they'd be drunk or whatever. And it would bounce back and forth. And even recently, like one of my friends who I love to death, we were talking about the Colin Kaepernick thing, right? He is a big believer that Colin Kaepernick should not be kneeling because it's like, you know, it's an indictment on our troops. And I'm like, it's not that black and white, bro. And like, he went off hard in the text message chain and couldn't hang in on a nuanced conversation. But he's like, fuck you. I guess my ideas and my points aren't valid in this space. And I'm like, no, actually, it's quite the opposite. But then a few days later, as he always does, it's kind of like hey man, I love you. I shouldn't have spoke to you that way. Like, we're good friends. I shouldn't speak to my good friend that way. Great. But what about all of that space in between? What about being able to hang in a place where we do argue about the nuances of something that's really complex, like what Colin Kaepernick is doing and the message that's being sent? Like, could we get to a higher ground versus bringing up the sword, the shield, and then a bloodbath that we then hug it out later and then nothing gets resolved?
And Dominick, you talked about this earlier, I think with the Hard Knocks example.
Yeah.
When guys feel that emotion, they'll dip their toe in it and then get out really quick.
Yeah.
And it sounds like this is really similar, where there was an emotion or there was something, there was a feeling, and instead of knowing what it was, being able to process it, being able to sit in it, being able to talk about it, which we do in men's group, we literally practice that.
Right on.
Instead, there's a reaction, which is anger and invalidation of my feelings, of my thoughts even, and then rage. And then maybe a simmering down over a period of time and saying, hey, I'm really sorry. I'm fearful that I may have lost something or caused something. And so I think that pinball effect of the extreme low and extreme high has everything to do with the fact that we really struggle without practice of feeling all those things
all
in
those
the
things
middle.
between.
And it's amazing where these conversations go when we're able to sit in them and really feel it out.
Yeah, what you just said is spot on. Like, there are many times in the men's group where I'll dip my toe in. I don't even know that I'm doing it because it's like such old world conditioning. I'll express something emotive and then I'll pivot to something else. And then like, you'll call me. I'll be like, whoa, stop. Go deeper into that sadness. Whoa, stop. What I felt from you was anger, not like sadness. I felt anger from you. Express that. What's the anger saying? What's that feeling underneath the feeling? And so men can see you in a way that you can't see you, and they can guide you and direct you. And some of my biggest breakthroughs have happened through that guidance and through that direction. Final point. The reason why that you need to do men's work is that when you deal with everything in isolation, you end up doing some pretty weird shit. You gotta stop that. You know, for me, dealing with my own insecurities and fears in isolation for like my early years led me to ending up in the rooms of Sex Addicts Anonymous. The only way that I had to deal with my fears was masturbation, was numbing out. And what I found was that like, I thought that was the only tools that were available to me. And I see other men either cheating on their women, or they become addicted to video games, or they become addicted to eating, or they become addicted to work. Like, you just do weird shit because you're dealing with it all on your own and you lose your fire.
My big one was either blow-ups, where I wouldn't say anything as on my own. I wouldn't be talking about it. And then all of a sudden, boom, whether that was in a relationship or whether, and people just wouldn't see it coming. Like, where the hell did that come from?
Yeah, like you left it inside for so long and then like you hit the tipping point and then an explosion occurred.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
I can relate to that.
Or the other one I'll do when I'm by myself is I will stay in something and stuck for too long. And I'll be spinning and thinking about it, or even trying to get out of a situation I got myself in, instead of like really bringing it to somebody that helps me process it.
Interesting.
Those are the two areas for me. It's either blow ups or just spinning.
And that can be exhausting, and that can take a lot of time, and you can just be wasting time.
Yeah.
I feel you. All right. So we hit through the 7 reasons why. That's not an exhaustive list. Like, these are just big ones that you and I have personally benefited from in our lives, why you should consider men's work. So to give some takeaways, if you're called to take a step forward and to find a men's group of your own, there's 2 groups that we would point you to, and then maybe we'll give you a little bit of guidance on how to start your own men's group, like the one that Bryan and I talked about that we participate in every Monday night. One men's group that I have been a part of is called the Mankind Project. The Mankind Project is called New Warrior Training. It's a 3-day weekend where you get a chance to go with other guys. It's very affordable. I think it's like $500 to $700 or something like that. And it's about like, how do you express and feel into your emotions? How do you build tribes of men? How do you go back into all of the communities that you're involved in and become like a leader that can create safe spaces for your children, for your coworkers, for the people that report to you, for your woman, for your man? The Mankind Project was something that I did like 4 or 5 years ago, and it was super powerful for me. That was where I actually learned permission to feel anger. Because at an early age, when I got angry, it was like, don't feel that way, right? Don't express it, keep it bad emotion. And what they taught me was like, anger's a gift. Rage Against the Machine also taught me that anger is a gift. But how to express it in like a constructive way where if I'm pissed at you, I'm not unhinged, which used to be the place I would go to, was a blow up. Like you said, it would be nuclear. And then that would create another series of things that I would have to call. Now I can take that anger and channel it and speak it in a way where I can lay it down, and it's fast. Data is an emotion. The Everyman Project. This is something that's only been around for a year and a half. Everyman is spelled EVRYMAN.co, I believe, or .com. You might want to check them out. So it leaves off one E. So EVRYMAN.com. That's the protocol that we follow in our men's group about how we tap into what I'm feeling physically, what I'm feeling emotionally. No problem solving, no advice giving, just a practice around like men pushing you towards what it is you're feeling and naming it. These immersive experiences, I cannot speak highly enough about, because like for you, Bryan, your pivot point was my men's retreat, which I don't have any scheduled. Otherwise I would share that with you. To go in and to spend 3 days unobstructed where you're just in it. It creates a moment where like you don't just get things intellectually from the neck up. You feel a shift emotionally at that cellular level from the neck down. And there's kind of like a before and an after moment, right? Before Christ and after Christ. Like it's just one of those moments in time where everything is different. So we can't recommend those highly enough.
Yeah. And my encouragement is that there will be feelings of fear that come up, of unknown. I don't know what this men's group is about. I don't want to talk about my feelings. I don't want to feel stupid or look insecure in front of other guys. Like all of this will come up for you.
It will. And that's the point, right? Like those weird feelings and moving towards those actually gives you a chance to be curious about like, why do I feel weird? When I tell people where I'm going for the weekend, they look at me cross-eyed. Why do I feel insecure when they look at me that way? Like, why don't I feel like I'm strong and I'm making an empowered decision? It gives you a chance to be curious about these feelings and these emotions so that you can harness them versus suppress.
There's been a couple of men's group activities that I've been to. I have done those with people I know. I've also done those by myself with people I don't know. Both are super valuable, but don't feel like you need to know someone to go to these events, because there's some sort of power there of not knowing and just being able to express to complete strangers.
That's huge. Actually, do not wait for someone else to say yes to you. If you can get someone else to go with you, great, all the power to you. But I've gone to all of those things. So I went to Sex Addicts Anonymous by myself. I went to the Mankind Project by myself, and I've come out with lasting relationships. And quite frankly, it gives you the opportunity to feel the fear, wet your pants, and do what you need to do with wet pants. And you want to build that skill because freedom lies in that. And freedom lies in being bold. You know what, Bryan, I was talking about before that maybe recommending to men to start their own group of men, like what you and I are doing on Monday night. But as I'm thinking about it, man, like if a man who's listening has never done men's work, it's probably not the right first step is to start a men's group where you're working through emotions and feelings because you have not learned a foundational skill set. You haven't seen other experts in their craft teaching you how to navigate through that. So tell me if you disagree, but I think the first step is to go to one of these places to see how it's done. Let someone else guide you first.
See how it's done, because there are some proven ways to help it be more effective.
Yes.
And my fear would be if somebody didn't know what it is going into it, it might turn them off for life.
Yeah.
This is a skill. It is a practice, Dominick, that I will carry out the rest of my life. Right on. It's that powerful. And I want everybody that's listening to this to have that same feel when they leave and they participate in these men's group.
Awesome. So our desire for you is to make sure that like if you have been called to or even ever thought about doing men's work, that by the end of this conversation today, that like you will take that next step forward. So we'd love to hear from you. Let us know, like, did you take action? Where did you go? And if there was something that we haven't named that has been really helpful for you as well, let us know those places because we would love to check them out.
Feel those feelings.
Feel them. See you. Hey, thanks for listening to the Man Amongst Men podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And if you want more access to tools and resources and you want information on our upcoming live events and retreats, head on over to www.doinnerwork.com.